The Jimquisition Awards start now! Firework display! Now! Welcome one and welcome all to the Jimquisition Awards, where we give awards to games on the Jimquisition. 5 of them, because it should be harder to get a good award than it is to get a shitty award, like we do with the top 10 shit games. Should be a more exclusive club. 2020 was a shit year, and 2021 will also be pretty shit. I could very easily say that 2020 for me was the year I finally lost to the tiniest last sliver of patience I have with the abuses of the so-called AAA video game industry. To be honest, after the year we've just had, I'm not really all that inclined to shower the game industry with praises, but it is an annual tradition, and far be it from me to fly in the face of tradition. So here we go. The top 5 games that to me represented some enjoyment in 2020. Starting with I can't remember what the first one I did was. Oh, Ghost of Tsushima! That was the one. Sony usually knocks at least one big exclusive out of the park per annum, and with the highly anticipated sequel to The Last of Us releasing in 2020, you can bet your ass that the high-quality PlayStation exclusive of the year was Ghost of Tsushima. Sucker Punch's open-world samurai adventure is an absolute thing of beauty, perhaps the best-looking console game of the generation when you combine the top-notch graphics with the fantastic use of colour. Tsushima Island is an absolutely beautiful place to explore, full of flowery fields, rich forests and mountains overlooking the ocean. The story is forgettable, featuring not so much characters as archetypes with dialogue, but it's made up for with the everything else. There are 2 ways to play, which can be mixed and matched, and both are terrific. Upfront honourable combat is quick and chaotic and involves switching battle stances to take on different enemies with a swiftness and elegance that always feels incredible. Even the fact the camera struggles to keep up at times never really bothered me, because combat has such an exquisite rhythm and flow. I still always had a good sense of where I was and what was going on, which is really saying something. I mean, that's an achievement for a game with a camera that struggles to follow you. Oh, and this is also that game where you can honourably challenge idiots to single combat and then cut them up in front of their friends for a laugh. Haha. Brilliant. The stealthy approach is just as viable and involves all the usual sneaking and distraction and poisoning and arrowing. And while none of it's massively innovative, it's some of the tightest, most polished open world action there is. With tons of stuff to unlock and play with, a gorgeous world and skillful sound design that provides brilliant audio cues to the player, Ghost of Tsushima is very much one of the finest examples of open world game design on the market, and easily the best in the genre this year. Plus, but...
Hello there. Do you like pizza?
Streets of Rage 4! Rare is the game so good I want to play it immediately after finishing it. Rare is the game so good that I want to play it multiple times in a row with increased difficulty settings. I'm a love it and dump it kind of gal when it comes to the majority of video games, having neither the time nor patience to do anything longer than I strictly have to. Even if it's something I like. So many abandoned wanks. It should be considered a point of no small notability then that I completed Streets of Rage 4 on every single difficulty level in like a week. Some may criticise the game's rigid adherence to retro gameplay, and they're not wrong. Streets of Rage 4 plays like a Streets of Rage game from the Genesis days, and I mean it does so exactly. It also recreates a number of boss battles from the series, and in general feels somewhat more like a redo than a sequel. However, I fucking love it. I still go back to the old Rage games now and then, when I can't think of anything to do but want to play something. An old brawler is a perfect way to pass the time, and Streets of Rage 4 is all the old brawling action I like, plus absolutely bloody wonderful cartoon visuals. Yes, it's nostalgic to a fault, but after waiting literal decades for a new Streets of Rage, more of the same is perfectly fine by me. To get me wearing my fingers down to bloody bone shards along into the night playing on the highest difficulty is an achievement only a handful of games have ever accomplished. I don't know if I've ever been this thorough with any game, so it's got to be doing something right, and the thing it does right is be Streets of Rage 4. Pretty much exactly the game I wanted. It's Brawl I ever wanted, cause a brawler. Yeah.
Prawn.
Prawn.
What's next? Why, it's Final Fantasy VII Remake has won an award. Final Fantasy VII Remake, a work of subversive genius. I truly mean that. I think it's a fucking masterstroke to take one of the safest bets in gaming, a game everyone had already accepted would be a critically acclaimed people pleaser, and make it into an uproarious controversy by turning the entire concept on its head is simply delicious. Though Cyberpunk 2077 did it far more brutally, Final Fantasy VII Remake was another fine example of why the gamers need to stop deciding to fall in love with and standing for video games they haven't played yet. Because those who marched into the remake with an idealized version in their heads got sorely disappointed. As for me, the fact Final Fantasy VII Remake throws a curveball and starts going off the course of the original game is exactly the kind of meta screwjob I appreciate, at least when it's done right. See, it starts as a straightforward modern retelling of Final Fantasy VII, but over time it becomes apparent there's a new narrative thread rewriting aspects of the original. Both as a product and an in-universe adventure, Final Fantasy VII is being literally remade. More importantly, the game handles it well. The twists not only surprised but actively pleased me, not least for the fact I'm a sucker for reboots that still include the original as some form of canon. Anyway, the controversy surrounding this game has actually lessened since the shock value has worn off, which is pretty amazing for a AAA video game where fandoms can hold grudges for decades. Part of this is thanks to the fact 7 Remake is a fucking fantastic video game in its own right. The actionized ATB combat is by far Square Enix's best attempt at a more direct and real-time RPG combat system, a near perfecting of the battles found in such titles as Final Fantasy XV. Cloud, Barret, Aerith, and especially Tifa are all wildly varied fun to play, with their classic attacks, weapons, and limit breaks recreated gorgeously. Parts of the story are expanded, both old and brand new characters are given some great focus with vibrant and amusingly hammy vocal performances, there are fun little side games, it looks real pretty, and the level of polish is some of the finest of this year. Plus, it's very, very fucking horny. One caveat though. If this is just an excuse for Tetsuya Nomura and his team to start going on some wild Kingdom Hearts bullshit, then I will retroactively take this award away. I really like the idea of following the general beats of Final Fantasy VII with diversions. Let's please not get into the heart darkness crap. This guy wants to fuck his bike though, right? What's that? You've got another video game that we're going to give a Jimquisition Awards to. Boglin Puppet whispering in my ear. Yes, Iconfell is one. It is Iconfell now for us to talk about. In all honesty, I've not played as much of Iconfell as I'd like to yet, and I was only going to give it an honourable mention rather than a full award, but then I look at what else I played this year and the so-called AAA industry doesn't really deserve more credit than I've begrudgingly given it this year, and some of the big critical indie darlings like Cloudpunk I've just a couple too many issues with from a design and structure standpoint. More importantly, if there's one thing I've learned about entertainment in 2020, it's the importance of representation. And yes, I know some of the hardcore gamers right now are rolling their eyes and ready to scream politics at me, but fuck it, suck on my big gay bias. Iconfell is full of queer representation, oh yes, I said it. Including trans and non-binary characters, which, as you might expect, is quite validating for someone who just this year came out as a trans NB. In coming to terms with my own identity, it became apparent just how much a lack of representation, a lack of seeing people like me in media, held back my ability to be happy for the entirety of my life so far. Growing up in a country that had only just started to begrudgingly and cynically admit bisexuals existed, I had no idea a spectrum of identity was even possible and made myself miserable trying to live up to unfair and unattainable expectations. It took seeing and talking to and learning from people like me to find out who I was. Games like Iconfell are more important than ever, especially as entire countries like the UK have been taken over by a transphobic cult bent on erasing first trans people and then everyone else on the spectrum. But don't go crying into your Mountain Dew gamer fuel, folks. I wouldn't have put Iconfell on this list if it wasn't also a bloody good game, which it is, by the way. A simple, classic-style tactical RPG with a turn-based combat system that adds timed button presses a la them Mario ones, Iconfell tells the story of a group of magical students trying to solve a mystery. A bit like Harry Potter, except not written by a fucked up TERF. The characters are affable, the plot is cute, the dialogue witty, and the music is really quite lovely. Especially when you start getting to the battle music with the lyrics. I love that shit. It also features some nice accessibility options for those who aren't great at timing buttons or indeed just playing the game, or, you know, people who get bored of too many turn-based combat stuff going on. All I'm saying is I'm glad they add fast fucking forward to the re-releases of 7 and 9 and 8 and all that. Iconfell isn't groundbreaking, doesn't have to be. It's made with pure love, and that much shines throughout.
During a kick around, you can work up a real appetite. So we usually end up in the clubhouse and grill some burgers. Burgers are a tasty alternative to burgers. Burgers are meat and very healthy. They're low in fat and a good source of fat to meat.
Hades. Hades. Game of the Year. Actual Game of the Year. I always say every Jimquisition Awards winner is equal standing, but not this year. Supergiant Games' Hades is not just the studio's finest work, it's one of the very best video games I have ever played. Essentially a hack-and-slash dungeon crawler roguelike, this endless trek through the Greek underworld is like a layer cake of storytelling, gameplay systems, and Greek gods being way too bloody sexy. Way too bloody sexy! Actually, that's a lie, they're not too sexy at all, they're just the right sexy. As Zagreus, son of Hades, you must fight your way through the layers of the afterlife, taking on mythological figures such as the Furies and the Hydra, in a bid to reach the surface and join the rest of the family on Olympus. To do this, you'll need to select from a variety of different weapons and go through the random dungeons familiar to any seasoned roguelike player. However, the sheer avalanche of content in this game is ridiculous, and it's all backed up by some of the finest writing and acting you could ever hope to see and hear in a game. With Supergiant doing all the development, the writing, and most of the fucking performances, including achingly delightful songs, I think the developer has cemented its place as one of the best ever. The flex of pure fucking talent in this game is overwhelming, and on top of that, It never ends. The combat is fast, diverse, and intensely gratifying, with one of several weapons in hand that all look and play completely differently. You dart around the environment, wailing on the colourful armies of the dead, meeting up with the gods to earn powerful new abilities in the form of boons, modelled after the gods to which they pertain. Can you guess the kind of powers Poseidon gives you? That's right, mashed potatoes. The boss battles are massive and unforgettable. There are new things to find every bloody run, and as you fight and die and sometimes win, you'll constantly unlock things that carry over for future runs, and like I said, it never ends. The amount of dialogue in the game is ridiculous. After weeks of intense playing, characters were still saying new things, either remarking on my loadout or things I'd done, or just offering brand new bits of character development I hadn't seen yet. The story is long and deep and truly alters the way you view the game. Every weapon has multiple forms with different playstyles to acquire. You can customize the starting area, build friendships with NPCs by giving them treats, access a skill tree, access another skill tree hidden behind the skill tree. You can fish, you can pet the Cerberus. It's visually amazing with hand-drawn artwork and 2D modeling that doesn't fucking look it. And what's more, for all its content, for all its tightly perfected combat, for all its voice work and music and years of development, Supergiant didn't crunch. It didn't force its developers to work overtime. In fact, it was strict policy to not crunch on Hades. Instead, using early access the way it's fucking meant to be used, Supergiant worked smarter rather than harder, taking its time, utilising community feedback along the way, and adding to the game as it went, rather than trying to stuff everything in all at once. I'm not saying it's easy work, of course, game development is always hard, but the point is, it was no more harder than it had to be. That's why there's a fucking fishing game in here on top of everything else, by the way. Taking time saves time. Time you can spend on putting fishing in your game. The result is not just a game made more ethically than any so-called AAA game, but one of the very best games ever made. You can tell this game was made with passion, imagination, and energy, and all the other things that crunch kills. The things this industry needs, but doesn't get enough of because it sucks all the life out of its talent by obscene design. The difference in quality between Hades and a game made with coercion, abuse, and rampant corporate cynicism is embarrassingly clear. Hades is just as good, just as pretty, just as fun, just as detailed, complex, deep, and content-rich as any video game. In fact, it's superior on all fronts to the majority of them. And it achieved this without teams of 500 working themselves to nervous breakdowns and a desperate, cloying need for additional monetization. And it proved you can get really great voice actors that aren't just the 5 the video game industry uses. Studios of Supergiant's size and scale and notability are prime targets for publisher predation. I pray Supergiant is never snapped up by a Microsoft or, heaven forbid, an Electronic Arts. For those indie studios with the clout to do so, making games the Hades way is something I desperately want more of. After seeing the results, I believe it's the way to make a truly magnificent game. When you take your time, stick within your funding, and treat your developers with respect, you get Hades. Who the fuck doesn't want Hades? Mitch McConnell. That's fucking who.
I just lost my rag completely and I bit her nipple off. But I'm still here.
Hard Bastards continues tomorrow at 10:45, Channel 5.
No Fall Guys, by the way. Fee to pay microtransactions, isn't it? The projectiles on the killer crab alien over there. Can't be bothered to go pick them up. Anyway, that was the Jimquisition Awards for 2020, posted actually in 2021, because the day they were going to be posted last year was the day we just had to do the Cyberpunk video. So that was good. Here we are, first Jimquisition of 2021, Jimquisition Awards done. A nice positive way to start the year. I'm sure that will continue. Thank God for me.